The girl was almost ash beneath the sun. Skin puckered and split, lips blistered to white. She crawled more than walked, knees raw through a pair of trousers that might have been blue once, now the color of dust. She'd left tracks behind her, long, desperate smears through the dry wash of Dead Elk Gulch, where no water had run since the war ended and the old mines folded. The cowboy watched her come from the ridge. Alone on his horse, a black-tongued sorrel called Cutter, he studied her through a squint. Wind kicked up from the east, full of grit and ruin. He could have turned back, should have. Folks in Sundown County knew better than to get tangled in what wasn't theirs. But he wasn't from Sundown, not really, not anymore. She reached the shade of a dead mesquite and collapsed with a sound too soft for pain, just breath leaving her body like it, given up on the rest. He rode down slow, Cutter stepping careful among the stones. When he dismounted, she didn't flinch. Her face was caked in blood and dust, and her eyes, barely slitted open, had the shine of an animal used to watching death come. He knelt beside her. "You got a name?" No answer, just the twitch of her fingers over a ribcage too thin for summer. He pulled his canteen from the saddlebag and touched it to her mouth. She drank without moving her arms, mouth working like she didn't trust the taste. He waited until she choked and turned her head away. "You from the wetly place?" Nothing. He stood, looking toward the west. A buzzard wheeled overhead. She wasn't more than 12 or 13, barefoot, no hat, no coat. He thought of leaving her there, like so many others had left so many others. That was the way of things now. Let the land sort the living from the dead. But then she said something, hoarse and small. "They killed her." He turned back. "Who?" "My mother at the creek, took her shoes, burned our cart." He didn't ask more, just picked her up, light as a breath of smoke, and slung her over Cutter's back. He walked beside the horse, through a silence so wide it swallowed the sound of their footsteps. Not until the sky turned red behind the canyon walls did he speak again. "You've got me now." She didn't answer. But she didn't jump down either, and that was something. They rode 2 days without a name between them. She slept in fits, twitching like dogs do in dreams. When he caught her staring at his revolver, he handed her a tin cup instead. She drank and slept again. At night he built no fire. There were men in those hills who hunted for less. He knew their kind, had ridden with worse once. On the third morning she spoke. "My name's me." He nodded. "I'm called Hunt." She seemed to weigh that, then asked, "You kill people?" Hunt didn't answer right away. He was skinning a rabbit he'd shot by creek light, the blade small but sharp in his hand. He didn't look up. "Sometimes." Me watched the blood pool beneath the pelt, her face unreadable. "Good." He paused. "You want to tell me what happened?" She shook her head. "Then don't." They ate quiet. When she was done, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, as if she were used to being scolded for the mess. Hunt handed her the rest of the meat and watched her hoard it in a scrap of cloth. For the first time he saw her as something more than a body left in the dust. She had plans, maybe not yet words for them, but there was fire in her, slow and mean, the kind that didn't go out easy. By the 5th day, Me had stopped asking when they'd reached town. She seemed to sense the road had no end. Hunt didn't make promises, just rode ahead, sometimes looking back to be sure she was still there. He taught her how to set snares, how to walk with the wind behind her. She didn't smile, but she learned fast. One night when the coyotes were calling in the North Hills, she asked, "You got family?" "No. Not even a wife." "No. Why?" He poked the fire until sparks flew. "Because they die." Me didn't ask more. She lay on her side, hands tucked beneath her jaw like a child might, and whispered something Hunt didn't catch. In the border town of Vireo, they stopped for supplies. Hunt bought a coat for her, stiff canvas lined with wool. She didn't thank him. Just put it on, and he saw how small she still was beneath it. At the saloon, he left her outside while he asked questions. When he came back, she was talking to a dog, an old shepherd mix missing a chunk of ear. The dog sat down beside her like they'd known each other forever. "He's hungry," she said. "So are we." She fed the dog a strip of jerky from her pocket. Hunt didn't stop her. He bought feed, shells, and a second knife. The man behind the counter asked about the girl. "Is she yours?" "No. She act like it." Hunt just nodded and left. It was 2 weeks before she told him about the men, 3 of them ragged and cruel. One had a scar across his lip. Another wore a deputy's badge he didn't earn. They came through their camp and took everything, food, blankets, her mother's hands. "I hid," she said, "under the cart." "You saw them." "Every one." Hunt looked away toward the fire. His jaw worked, but he said nothing. Me crawled closer, her coat drawn tight, eyes like glass. "Will you help me kill them?" He didn't move. "You said I've got you now." The words hung there raw and cold. Then he nodded. "Yes." And me, for the first time, smiled. Not soft. Not sweet, but like someone remembering what it was to be real. They left Vireo before dawn, long before the saloon girls stirred, and the drunks began coughing their way into daylight. Hunt didn't say where they were going, and me didn't ask. She rode now with more certainty, her small frame tight in the saddle, the new coat hanging loose but warm. The dog, she'd named him Rye, followed at a distance, limping but loyal, a shadow stitched to their trail. Hunt rode hard for 3 days. At the first camp, he began teaching her to shoot. Not with the Colt, not yet, but with the rifle he'd pulled from a saddle scabbard wrapped in oilcloth. It was long for her arms, but she adjusted, listening close. "You don't shoot to scare, you shoot to stop." Me nodded, sighting down the barrel. "Don't pull, squeeze." The crack of the shot echoed off canyon walls. She flinched, teeth clenched, then set up again. The second shot split a rock the size of a crow's heart. Hunt grunted approval. Me didn't smile. By the 5th day they'd entered no man's land, old Comanche range now empty and still, save for coyotes and bones half sunk in dust. Wagon wrecks dotted the path. The dogs sniffed each one like it remembered better times. Me did not. In one wreck she found a hairbrush, its teeth cracked and dirty. She cleaned it in silence that night and dragged it through her hair until blood rose behind her ears. "You don't have to do that," Hunt said, not unkind. Me kept brushing. "She used to." In a town called Preacher's Jaw, they found their first trail. A man behind the livery recognized Hunt, but not the girl. He asked questions with his eyes and got none in return. "A scarlet man passed through," he said, after enough silver changed hands. 2 weeks back, mean, had a boy with him wore a badge he didn't deserve. Hunt leaned close. "They say where they were headed. North, maybe toward the basin, maybe east to Chimney Hill. They don't stay long." Neither did Hunt. Me mounted without waiting. Rain came on the 7th night. Cold, slick rain that made their camp a swamp, and the fire hissed like it was dying in its sleep. Hunt huddled near a mesquite trunk, turning a map over in his lap. Me sat beneath the tarp, her knees drawn tight, hands red with cold. "You scared of them?" she asked, voice low beneath the rain. "No. Even after what they did." Hunt turned the map over once more. "I'm scared of what you'll be when it's done." Me didn't answer. Rye, the dog, laid his head on her leg. They came to Chimney Hill by way of Devil's Spur, a pass known for rustlers and worse. On the 3rd day through, me saw a body strung from a juniper tree, hands gone, face hollowed by birds. She didn't cry. Later that night, Hunt caught her staring at the noose rope still hanging there. "Why, they hang him." Wrong place, wrong time, maybe stole something. Would you hang someone? Hunt looked at her. The firelight caught his eyes, flat and distant. I've done worse. Chimney Hill had changed since Hunt last saw it. The mines were shut, the brothel burned, and the sheriff's office empty but for rats. Still, people remembered. They found the badge boy first. His name was Troy Calder, and he ran the bar at the Bleeding Drum now, a squat place full of slurred songs and twitchy men. Me stayed outside with Rye. Hunt went in. 10 minutes later, Hunt returned, a small cut across his knuckles and a grin set to his mouth. Me waited. He's not dead, Hunt said. What'd he say? Other two went west. One's sick, real sick. Did you kill him? No. Me frowned. I want to. You will. They left that night into cold wind and silence. Me rode with her back straighter, the rifle strapped across her lap like a promise. At one point she asked, "Why didn't you kill him?" Hunt didn't look over. He's not the worst. She turned that over in her mind. Not the worst, not innocent, not worth sparing, just not the worst. That night she dreamed of the fire, her mother screaming, the men laughing. The smoke so thick she couldn't tell if the sky was falling. She woke with her knife in her hand. By the time they reached the basin, the air was thin and sharp. Snow lingered in patches like scars refusing to heal. The cabin was there just as Troy said, a crooked shack half swallowed by pine and silence. Hunt scoped it from the ridge. One man inside, another coughing, might be dying. Me checked her rifle. You stay here. No. Hunt looked at her, long and unreadable, then nodded. All right. They crept down like wolves, slow and quiet. Rye stayed behind, watching. Me's heart thumped so loud it shook her teeth. Hunt kicked the door in with one hard boot. The first man, scar across his lip, just like she remembered, reached for his gun too slow. Me shot him in the side. He screamed, fell, bled. The other one, sicker, tried to run. Hunt stopped him cold with the butt of his revolver. Me stepped into the cabin. The man on the floor wheezed, "You little bitch." She shot him in the throat. Hunt didn't speak. She walked to the dying man on the bed. He was gray and shaking, eyes wide with something close to understanding. Me lined close. She screamed when you cut her. I heard her. The man reached out, fingers clawed. She stabbed him in the chest, slow, and watched. Outside, the snow began to fall again. Hunt saddled the horses in silence. When me came out, she looked older, not by years but by miles. He didn't say a word. She climbed into the saddle beside him. "I'm not done," she said. "I know." He turned Cutter toward the trail, and together they rode into the snow. The third man had vanished. His name was Harlan Vex, though me didn't know it yet, only that he'd been the quiet one, the one who never laughed, never shouted. He watched while the others did the hurting, held the rifle, took his share, but never dirtied his hands. That was worse to her. Cowards always were. Hunt said he was the most dangerous. Quiet men hold their rage longer, he said, till it turns into something smarter. They followed rumor westward, across broken land where the sun gave no warmth. Abandoned ranches and outlaw camps, arroyos filled with bones and old bullet casings. Me asked fewer questions. She understood now how the world operated, slow, cruel, and without apology. One night by the San Pedro crossing, they met a woman who'd seen Vex. She ran a chapel converted into a trading post, nails still rusted into the walls where crucifixes had once hung. Came through with a wagon of horses, kept his face low, she said. Paid in gold teeth, left east toward Bitterwind. Me glanced at Hunt. That a town? No, he said. That's a place men go to disappear. Bitterwind sat cradled in the scar of the earth. It wasn't marked on most maps, but people knew it. A cluster of stilt shacks and brushwood hovels surrounding a dried spring where the wind whistled through bones hanging from cedar poles. Men went there to drink, to hide, to die slow. They arrived just after dusk. Me wore her coat buttoned to the throat, rifle slung across her back, knife in her boot. Her eyes no longer searched the horizon for mercy, only for threat. Hunt rode in ahead, as always. No one challenged him. He looked too much like something death had shaped and then let walk. They found lodging in a ruin of a house that used to be a mercantile. A woman lived there, blind in one eye, teeth filed sharp. She charged $1 for the roof and a story. Vex works the mine now, she said. Owns a stake, or says he does, don't speak much. Me swallowed hard. He's here. The woman nodded, spitting tobacco into a jar. Don't ask him for nothing. Don't look at him too long. He ain't right. Me spent the next day watching. The mine was a collapsed shaft with iron rails and sunburnt workers. Vex came in the evening, walking with a limp and a coat too fine for his surroundings. He didn't talk, just counted sacks and whispered to a man with a shotgun. When me saw his face, something turned in her chest. Not rage, not fear, something colder. A settling, like ice on still water. He's the one, she said to Hunt that night. I know. I want to do it different. How? No bullets. They waited until the next hall night, when Vex and his men drank at the pit's edge and laughed over dice. Hunt slipped into the tent and cut the mule lines. Me carried a bucket of kerosene and soaked the wagons. When the fire bloomed, the men scattered. Vex stumbled out, coughing, coat on fire. Me stepped from the shadows and leveled the rifle. Not to shoot, just to make him see. He froze. I know you, he said. No, you don't. Rye growled from behind her. Hunt stood silent at the crest, eyes flat. You can't do this, Vex gasped. Me took a step forward. You remember the woman you let them burn. He said nothing. She was my mother. Still he said nothing. No plea, no denial. Me pulled the knife from her boot. You'll die like she did. Hunt didn't look away. He didn't speak. When me stepped back from the blood, her hands shaking, he took the knife from her and cleaned it in the dirt. You done now? He asked. She looked at Vex's body, at the fire behind her, at her hands. No. They rode out of Bitterwind before sunrise, shadows long behind them. Me didn't cry, not then, not after. The world had no room for that. She rode ahead this time, Rye beside her. Hunt followed, quiet. He didn't say what he was thinking. That killing didn't cure it. That revenge left a hole wider than grief. That one day she might wake and not know what else to live for. He didn't say any of that, just watched her ride into the dawn. The girl who had no food, no faith, no shelter, but had him. Snow found them in the highlands, late and sudden. Wind bit down from the peaks with no warning, turning dirt trails into whitewashed veins through the rock. Me pulled her coat tighter, but the cold wasn't what troubled her. Something inside her had gone still since Bitterwind, not numb, not dead, just quiet like a creek after floodwater drains. She didn't talk much, and Hunt didn't press. He'd seen that silence before, worn it once. They took shelter in a cabin long abandoned by miners. The roof leaked and the hearth was black with old soot, but it held heat when they lit a fire. Me crouched near the flames, feeding Rye scraps of dried venison. She didn't eat much herself. You need food, Hunt said. I ain't hungry. That's not the same. She didn't answer. He set another log on the flames and sat across from her. You want to go back? He asked. South, Vireo, maybe Preacher's Jaw. You've got no more cause to follow me. Me didn't look up, just scratched Rye's neck until he sighed. I ain't following you. The snow held them for 3 days. On the second, me found a journal buried under a floorboard. It belonged to a boy who'd worked the mine. She read pieces of it out loud, not to Hunt, but to the room. He wrote about a girl he loved, she said. Said he was saving for a house. Said he never told her because he was scared. Hunt looked up. What's her name? Don't say. That's about right. Me shut the book and put it back. When the snow cleared, they rode north, past ridgelines where hawks circled and rivers ran too fast to freeze. They found a town called Sevier, where no one asked names and the preacher was also the sheriff. Hunt picked up supplies. Me found a boy her age watching her from behind a chicken wire fence. He offered her a plum. She didn't take it. You don't smile, he said. Me stared at him. You don't bleed. He didn't speak to her again. They passed through cattle country next. Endless fences, long grass bent under frost, men on horseback who eyed Hunt with suspicion and kept their rifles close. Me watched their hands more than their mouths. She had no patience for liars now. One morning they came across a farmhouse half-burnt, the barn scorched to framewood. A woman sat on the porch with a shotgun and a dead dog at her feet. Bandits, Hunt asked. No, she said. Landmen want the water. Came with paper first, then fire. Me looked at the woman, her fingers raw from cold and soot. You gonna fight? The woman stared back. With what? Me stepped off her horse, took the rifle from her saddle and placed it gently on the porch. The woman blinked. You keep it, me said. She mounted again without waiting for thanks. Hunt followed. You gave her your rifle, he said. She needed it. You'll be lighter now. Good. That night Hunt handed her something wrapped in oilcloth. A Colt. Smaller than his, worn but clean. Don't thank me, he said. Just don't miss. Me turned the revolver in her hands like it was a living thing. She said nothing, just slid it into her coat. They reached a river town by early spring. Houses built on stilts, bridges sagging with rain weight. A girl could vanish in a place like that. So could a man. Hunt asked around quiet, took work guarding freight barges. Me earned coins skinning trout at the docks. They stayed longer than planned. One night she asked, You ever think about what comes next? Next. If you ever stop running. Hunt was quiet. I don't run, he said. Me tilted her head. Then what do you call this? He didn't answer. Just looked toward the water. Weeks passed. Me grew stronger, sharper. She learned how to spot a lie by the twitch in someone's jaw, how to fish with just a wire hook, how to move like she didn't exist. Hunt watched from distance. He wasn't building her into something new, just helping her burn off what the world had tried to bury. Then one morning, a rider came through town with a message in a blood-stained envelope. Hunt read it in silence. Me waited. What is it? He handed it over. She read the name. Elias Grail, her father's name. I thought he was dead. So did he. That night, me didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling until her breath grew foggy with the cold. Her mother's voice haunted the edges of her mind, a memory soft and sharp. She told me he ran, me said aloud, said he left us. Maybe he didn't, Hunt replied. She wouldn't have lied. No, Hunt said. But maybe she didn't know. Me stood and walked to the door, the dog rising beside her. What are you gonna do? Hunt asked. She turned. I'm going to find out. They left the river town at first light. No trail, no map, no promises. Just the road, wide and quiet, and the truth waiting at the end of it. The land grew stranger the farther east they rode. Green hills turned to pine-thick forest, and the air hung wet and heavy, filled with the scent of moss and rot. Roads disappeared into roots and fog, and even birds seemed hesitant to speak. Me rode quiet, the letter tucked inside her coat. She hadn't read it again. Once was enough. The name alone had ignited something deep in her chest, confusion maybe, or fury. They felt the same these days. Hunt didn't ask questions. He knew when a wound needed silence more than stitching. They stopped in a place called Bastion Hollow. Not a town, just a gathering of shacks around an old sawmill. People there looked haunted, faces slack, eyes red-rimmed. A woman sweeping the dirt said there, been sickness. A fever that took the old and weak first, then the rest. Me looked around at the graves, no markers, just stones. You looking for someone? The woman asked. A man named Grail, me said. The woman's eyes narrowed. That preacher. Me flinched. Preacher. The woman nodded. Come here a year back. Said he used to be army, then lost his way. Built a chapel. Doesn't preach anymore, just digs. Me looked to Hunt. He said nothing. They found him 3 miles out, building fences in the rain. His back was bent, hair gray at the roots. The chapel behind him was falling apart, its bell missing, its door split down the middle. Me dismounted slow. He looked up and froze. She didn't speak, neither did he. Rye growled. Finally, the man set down his hammer. You're her, he said. You're me. She didn't nod. You were dead. She stepped closer. You left. His shoulders dropped. Your mother told you that. She said you ran. He looked at the ground. I did, not from you, from men who wanted me dead. I told her to follow. She wouldn't. Me's jaw tightened. She died screaming, she said. He closed his eyes. I know. They didn't hug, they didn't touch. Just stood there, years of silence between them like a field full of bones. Hunt stayed back, arms crossed, watching. He didn't trust the man. He didn't trust anyone who let a girl grow wild on revenge. Grail invited them inside. Me followed. The chapel stank of mildew and ash. Inside, shelves held jars of herbs, dried roots, old maps. A cot in the corner sagged with use. I tried to forget, Grail said, but the land doesn't let you. Me walked the room like she was searching for something buried. You ever look for us? I sent men, paid them, thought you were gone. She turned. But you stopped. His hands trembled. I didn't know how to keep going. Her voice was ice. So you buried God and called it even. He didn't answer. That night, she didn't sleep in the chapel. She built a fire outside and sat with Rye curled against her legs. Hunt joined her silent. I don't hate him, she said. Hunt didn't reply. I thought I would. That's the trouble with ghosts. When they turn real, they're never enough. Me stared into the fire. I don't know what to do now. Then don't. She looked at him. Wait, he'll eat. That's doing enough. They stayed a week, long enough for me to see how her father moved. How he winced at noise, how his hands trembled when he lit candles. He wasn't evil, just ruined. One morning she found him at the chapel's edge, carving names into wood, her mother, hers, a third name too worn to read. I tried to build something that would last, he said. Me watched him for a while. You still can. Before they left, she gave him the letter. He didn't open it, just held it like it weighed more than steel. If you ever want to see me again, she said, you'll come looking. Then she turned and rode off, Hunt beside her, Rye in tow, no longer chasing revenge, but something else, something harder. Spring dragged its heels through the highlands, slow and stingy. Rain came more often than sun, and the trails turned to mud, thick enough to drag hooves. Me didn't complain. Her silence now was steadier, less bitter. Like she'd struck something solid beneath all the grief and rage. Hunt saw the change. She watched the road, not the past. She ate full meals. She slept without the knife clenched in her fist. They weren't headed anywhere, not yet. Just moving, breathing, that was enough for now. Until they found the dying man in the ditch. He was no older than 20, pale as bone, blood leaking from a hole in his stomach. He'd been shot recently. Me knelt beside him, checked his pulse. Still there, she said. Hunt pulled water from his canteen. The boy's eyes fluttered open. Riders, he whispered, took the town. What town? Hunt asked. The boy coughed, thick and wet. Holler's Ridge. They came at night. Said they owned it now. Who? Marshall's men, but they weren't wearing badges. Me wiped blood from his mouth. Why'd they shoot you? Ran for help. He didn't live another hour. They buried him beneath a cottonwood and marked it with stone. You want to ride the other way? Hunt asked. Me stood looking west. No. Holler's Ridge sat low in a narrow valley, all its roads sloped and slick with runoff. They approached just before dusk, keeping off the main trail. From a bluff above, me counted 6 horses tied outside the saloon, 2 men on the porch, rifles in their laps, another on the roof with a spyglass. She chewed the inside of her cheek. They've done this before. Hunt nodded. They know the rhythm. What do? We change it. That night they crept in from the north. Hunt cut the saloon horses loose, slapping their flanks until they vanished down the ridge. Me moved quiet as shadow, circled behind the mercantile. She poured lamp oil across the crate stacked there, then stepped back and lit a match. The fire went up fast, bright as day. Gunfire followed. The man on the roof dropped first, Hunt's bullet tearing through his neck. Another went down by the water trough, caught off guard. Me moved like she'd trained in war, not just hate, slipped between shadows, fired twice, hit once. The man screamed but didn't rise again. By dawn, 3 were dead, 2 had fled. One they left tied to a post with a warning carved into his shoulder: "You don't own this place." The townsfolk came out slow, like animals testing air after a storm. A woman in a torn shawl stared at me. You did this. We helped, me said. The woman reached out, touched me's hand. Her eyes shone, but she didn't cry. Thank you. Me flinched but didn't pull away. They stayed a few days, helped rebuild, sharpened old tools. Traded pelts for bread and honey. At night, me sat with the children, taught them how to whittle safely, told no stories, just showed them how to hold the knife. Hunt watched her from the porch. She was no longer just the girl who survived. She was the girl others looked to. On the last morning, the sheriff returned, not the false one, the real one, gray-bearded, limping. He'd been away fetching supplies. Came back to find order returned and blood still drying in the mud. He eyed Hunt, then me. You a marshal? No. Bounty? No. Then what? Me answered, just tired of seeing people die scared. The sheriff nodded. That'll do. They rode out with no fanfare, just 2 shapes fading into the tree line. You think they'll stay safe? Me asked, for a while. That enough? No, Hunt said, but it's something. Me looked ahead. Feels like we could do more. We could. Should we? Hunt didn't answer right away, only if you want to. Me thought on that, then nodded, and kept riding. The roads cracked open beneath the heat, and the trees dropped their leaves too early, as if surrendering before the fight began. Me and Hunt rode south now, drawn by whispers of unrest, of towns folded under the weight of greedy men with government seals and guns that glinted like teeth. They weren't heroes. Me hated that word. Heroes died too easy, and the stories never matched the truth. But they knew how to burn rot out of a place, knew how to listen for the wrong kind of silence, and they carried justice like it was welded into their bones. One town had women chained in a cellar, called it debt. Me broke the lock with her rifle butt and stood at the door until each one walked out blinking in the sun. Another had a preacher who sold children to passing travelers. Hunt shot him through the gut and made sure he lived long enough to hear the church burn. They moved like a sickness through the land, quiet, spreading, unshakable. Some started calling her the girl with the dog and the fire eyes. Some called Hunt the broken judge. Neither corrected them. They camped one night beneath a ridge scattered with black stone. Me carved a small wooden horse with her pocket knife, the kind her mother once made her. You still think about them? Hunt asked. She nodded. Every night. I still see their faces. No, she said. Just hear the wind where their voices used to be. In Dry Fork they found a man who claimed to be Marshal Gray. He wore the badge, wore the coat, but me saw his boots too clean. His eyes too mean. You ever bury a child? She asked him. He blinked, confused. Then you ain't no marshal. She shot him before he could reach for his belt. News spread faster than they could ride. A woman with ash-black hair and a wolfish dog riding beside a man whose silence cut sharper than his bullets. They didn't travel alone anymore. Not really. People followed. A mother from Sevier, a boy from Bitterwind. A one-armed veteran who owed Hunt his life from years back. They didn't ride like an army, just survivors who'd found something in me worth trailing. Maybe it was her fire. Maybe it was her quiet. Maybe it was just the way she looked at wrong like it was a thing she could end, and then did, but not every town welcomed them. In Redstone, the mayor locked the gates. We've got no use for trouble, he said. Me stared him down from her saddle. You've already got trouble, you just haven't bled for it yet. They left the gates shut. The next week, Redstone's jail caught fire. No one said who lit the match. But when me returned, they opened the gates without question. Hunt watched her change. Not hard, she'd been hard already, but sharper, focused like flint. She didn't smile more, but she stood taller, slept easier. Sometimes he worried the fire would eat her whole. Sometimes he knew it already had. But then he'd catch her rubbing Rye's ear, or leaving bread on a doorstep, or standing by a widow who'd lost everything and saying nothing at all, just being there. And he knew she still had something left inside, something worth saving. They passed through Vireo again, where it all began. The saloon was rebuilt, the dog long gone. Me stood at the edge of town and stared down the road where Hunt had first lifted her onto Cutter's back. She said nothing, just turned and kept walking. You've got me now, Hunt said softly. Me didn't stop. I always did, she said. They never settled. Settling meant walls, and walls meant weakness. But one day, in a place with no name and no map, they stopped by a river, built a cabin with their own hands, didn't hang a sign, didn't light a beacon, just lived. People found them sometimes, broke and beaten like me had once been. She never turned them away. She fed them, taught them, told them nothing of her past, but they knew, and that was enough. And so it was that the girl with no food, no faith, no shelter, the girl found in the dirt with blood on her lips and vengeance in her bones, became something more. Not just a survivor, not just a weapon, but a place, a force, a name spoken in fear and in hope. And when the nights were cold and the wind howled like it used to, she'd sit by the fire, Rye at her feet, Hunt at her back. And she'd whisper to the dark, "You've got me now." The dark never answered, but it never dared to come closer.